Success always looks like a mystery from the outside. You see the fame, the power, the results, but never the rules behind it that made it possible. The truth is, every great story is shaped by hidden laws. Have you ever wondered what the most successful people in the world really think about? What truly runs through their minds? Because once you understand these 5 lessons, you'll realize the same rules that built their success can shape yours too. First, Murphy's Law. The thing you fear most, do it again and again, until fear turns into fuel. Second, write your problems down on paper, because half the tension ends the moment you put it into words. Third, Hilbert's paradox. No one knows the perfect answer, so start by asking yourself what the first step is. Fourth, the law of value. If you provide the right solution in the right place, the money will follow. And fifth, don't jump into everything. If it doesn't matter, don't waste your energy. But here's what nobody tells you about these principles. They're not just strategies. They're laws. Natural laws that govern human behavior, psychology, and success itself. Most people stumble through life reacting to circumstances, wondering why others seem to effortlessly rise above challenges while they remain stuck. The difference isn't talent, luck, or even hard work. The difference is understanding the invisible architecture of how reality actually works. Think about it this way. A master architect doesn't build by randomly stacking bricks. They understand the laws of physics, the properties of materials, the way forces interact. Similarly, those who achieve extraordinary results don't stumble into success. They understand the fundamental laws that govern human potential and use them with precision. What you're about to discover are 5 mental frameworks that separate ordinary people from extraordinary ones. These aren't motivational quotes or productivity hacks. These are the deep principles that shape human destiny. By the end of this exploration, you'll see the world differently. You'll recognize patterns that were always there but invisible to you before. The ancient Stoics called this living according to nature, not the nature of trees and rivers, but the nature of how reality truly operates. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his private journal, "Very little is needed to make a happy life. It is all within yourself, in your way of thinking." He wasn't talking about positive thinking. He was talking about aligning your mind with the fundamental laws that govern success and fulfillment. So let's begin this journey into the architecture of human excellence. Anything that can go wrong will go wrong. That's how most people understand Murphy's Law, but that's the surface interpretation, the one that breeds anxiety and paralysis. The deeper truth is far more powerful. When you expect things to go wrong, when you prepare for failure, when you face your fears repeatedly, you transform from victim to master. Edward Murphy Jr., the aerospace engineer who gave this law its name, wasn't spreading pessimism. He was revealing a profound truth about human psychology and preparation. The things we fear most are often the things that, once mastered, become our greatest sources of strength. Consider this. Every single person who has achieved something extraordinary has had to face their deepest fears not once, but over and over again. The entrepreneur who fears rejection makes hundreds of cold calls. The artist who fears criticism puts their work into the world anyway. The leader who fears making the wrong decision continues to make decisions, learning from each outcome. Friedrich Nietzsche captured this perfectly when he wrote, "What does not kill me makes me stronger." But he wasn't advocating for reckless endangerment. He was pointing to a fundamental law of human development. We grow stronger precisely at the point of our greatest resistance. There's a psychological principle called stress inoculation. Just as vaccines expose you to a weakened version of a disease to build immunity, repeatedly exposing yourself to controlled versions of your fears builds psychological resilience. Navy SEALs understand this. They don't just train for perfect conditions, they train for everything going wrong simultaneously. When Murphy's Law inevitably strikes during a real mission, they're prepared not just physically, but mentally and emotionally. But here's where most people misunderstand the process. They think courage means the absence of fear. Actually, courage is feeling the fear and acting anyway. More importantly, it's feeling the fear, acting anyway, and doing it so repeatedly that the fear transforms into something else entirely. Fuel. Think of fear as an energy source. Most people experience fear as a stop sign, a reason to retreat or avoid. But what if fear is actually pointing you toward exactly where you need to go? What if the intensity of your fear is directly proportional to the importance of the action you're avoiding? Stephen Pressfield calls this resistance in his book, The War of Art. He noticed that the closer he got to doing something that would truly advance his life and career, the stronger the force pushing back became. The fear wasn't random. It was precisely calibrated to the significance of the opportunity. Let me tell you about a study conducted at Harvard Business School. Researchers tracked 2 groups of entrepreneurs over 5 years. Group A spent months perfecting their business plans, conducting extensive market research, trying to eliminate every possible risk. Group B started with basic plans but began immediately, learning and adjusting as problems arose. Guess which group had higher success rates? Group B outperformed Group A by nearly 300%. Why? Because they were practicing Murphy's Law. They expected things to go wrong and built their capability to handle problems in real time. The Roman Emperor, Marcus Aurelius, practiced a mental exercise called premeditatio malorum, imagining everything that could go wrong. This wasn't pessimism. It was preparation. By mentally rehearsing challenges before they occurred, he removed their power to surprise and paralyze him. Here's how you apply this law in your own life. Identify the one thing you're avoiding because you're afraid it might go wrong. Then ask yourself, what specifically am I afraid will happen? Write down every worst-case scenario. Now ask, if this worst-case scenario actually occurred, how would I handle it? What would be my next step? Suddenly, the fear begins to dissolve because you've moved from vague anxiety to specific preparation. And here's the paradox. The more prepared you are for things to go wrong, the more likely things are to go right. Not because you've eliminated risk, but because you've eliminated the paralysis that risk creates. The second law is deceptively simple. Write your problems down. There's something almost magical that happens when you take a problem from inside your head and put it onto paper. The swirling chaos of anxiety transforms into manageable, specific challenges. The overwhelming becomes analyzable. The impossible becomes merely difficult. Dr. James Pennebaker at the University of Texas spent decades studying what he calls expressive writing. His research revealed something remarkable. People who wrote about their problems for just 15-20 minutes a day experienced measurable improvements in physical health, emotional well-being, and problem-solving ability. Their immune system strengthened, their stress hormones decreased, and their mental clarity increased. But why does this simple act of externalization have such profound effects? The answer lies in how our brains process information. When a problem exists only in your mind, it's competing for mental resources with everything else you're thinking about. It's like having multiple browser tabs open, each one slowing down the entire system. But when you write a problem down, you free up that mental processing power for actual problem solving rather than problem maintaining. Think about it this way. Your conscious mind can only hold about 7 pieces of information at once, but a problem is rarely just one piece of information. It's a complex web of concerns, possibilities, fears, and potential solutions. When you try to hold all of this in your head simultaneously, you create mental overload. Writing forces you to break the complexity into digestible pieces. Leonardo da Vinci understood this principle intuitively. His notebooks weren't just artistic sketches, they were external thinking tools. He wrote backwards, drew from every angle, and captured not just his ideas but his questions, concerns, and partial solutions. By externalizing his thinking process, he freed his mind to make connections that would have been impossible while juggling all that information internally. Benjamin Franklin took this even further. When facing a difficult decision, he would create what he called a prudential algebra. He'd draw a line down the middle of a piece of paper, listing pros on one side and cons on the other. But here's the sophisticated part. He wouldn't just count items. He'd assign weights to each factor based on importance, then cross out equal weights on both sides until he could see which direction the balance truly tilted. Modern neuroscience has revealed why this works so effectively. When we write by hand, we activate the reticular activating system, the part of our brain that determines what information gets our attention. This is why you suddenly notice red cars everywhere after deciding you want to buy a red car. By writing down your problems, you're literally programming your brain to notice solutions. But there's a specific way to do this that multiplies the effectiveness. Don't just write, "I'm stressed about money." That's still too vague. Instead, write, "I'm stressed because I have $2,847 in my checking account. My rent is $1,200 due in 12 days, and I won't get paid for another 15 days. Suddenly, the problem isn't an overwhelming cloud of financial anxiety. It's a specific mathematical challenge with a clear timeline. The ancient Stoics practiced a form of this with their evening reflections. Seneca would end each day by examining what happened, what he learned, and what he could do better tomorrow. He wasn't just journaling, he was conducting systematic problem analysis. Every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end, he wrote, recognizing that clarity about current challenges creates the foundation for future solutions. Here's a practical framework. When you're feeling overwhelmed or stuck, take a piece of paper and divide it into 4 quadrants. In the first quadrant, write exactly what's bothering you. Be specific. In the second quadrant, write what you can control about this situation. In the third quadrant, write what you cannot control. In the fourth quadrant, write one small action you could take today that might move you forward. This simple exercise does something profound. It separates problems from emotions, controllable from uncontrollable, and thinking from action. Half the tension really does end the moment you put it into words, because you've moved from feeling the problem to analyzing it. Now we move to the third law, Hilbert's paradox of uncertainty. David Hilbert was one of the greatest mathematicians of the 20th century, but his most profound insight wasn't mathematical. It was philosophical. He recognized that in any complex system, there will always be true statements that cannot be proven within that system. In other words, no matter how much you know, there will always be uncertainty. Most people find this terrifying. They wait for more information, better conditions, clearer signs. They believe that successful people know something they don't, that there's a secret formula for perfect decisions. But here's the paradox. The most successful people succeed not because they have perfect information, but because they've learned to act effectively with imperfect information. Jeff Bezos calls this disagree and commit. At Amazon, when facing a decision without clear data, they don't delay. They make the best decision possible with available information, then commit fully to making it work. Bezos realized early that the cost of delay often exceeds the cost of imperfection. This principle appears throughout history in different forms. Napoleon said, "I may lose a battle, but I shall never lose a minute." He understood that in a dynamic environment, speed of action often matters more than perfection of planning. The general who acts on 70% certainty will defeat the general who waits for 100% certainty, because 100% certainty never comes. But this isn't about recklessness. It's about understanding the difference between decisions that are reversible and irreversible. Bezos makes another distinction. Type 1 decisions are one-way doors. Once you walk through, you can't come back. These deserve careful consideration. Type 2 decisions are two-way doors. You can easily reverse them if they don't work out. Most decisions are type 2, but people treat them like type 1. Consider the paralysis of perfectionism. The writer who won't start because they don't know the perfect opening line. The entrepreneur who won't launch because the product isn't perfect. The job seeker who won't apply because their resume isn't ideal. They're waiting for certainty in an uncertain world. Maya Angelou, who wrote some of the most profound literature of the 20th century, had a different approach. "There is no greater agony than bearing an untold story inside you," she wrote. She didn't wait for perfect words. She started with imperfect words and improved them through revision. The first draft wasn't supposed to be perfect. It was supposed to exist. The ancient Chinese had a saying, "The best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is now." This isn't just about procrastination, it's about understanding that perfect timing doesn't exist. There will always be reasons to wait, more information to gather, better conditions to hope for. Reid Hoffman, the founder of LinkedIn, captured this perfectly. If you're not embarrassed by the first version of your product, you've launched too late. This seems counterintuitive. Shouldn't you be proud of what you release? But Hoffman understood that in a rapidly changing world, learning from real users is more valuable than perfecting in isolation. There's a psychological principle called the paradox of choice. Research by Barry Schwartz revealed that too many options actually decrease satisfaction and increase anxiety. When people have unlimited time to make decisions, they don't make better decisions. They make themselves miserable pursuing an impossible standard of perfection. The solution isn't to lower standards, it's to change the definition of perfect. Perfect isn't the absence of flaws. Perfect is the optimal balance between quality and timing. A decision that gets you moving today is often superior to a theoretically better decision that comes next month. Here's how to apply Hilbert's paradox. When facing a decision, ask yourself these 3 questions. What's the worst realistic outcome if I act now? What's the cost of waiting another month? What's one small step I could take today that would give me more information? Often, that small step reveals that you don't need perfect information. You need just enough information to take the next small step. Success isn't about knowing the entire path. It's about seeing clearly enough to take the next step, then the next, then the next. The path reveals itself as you walk it, but first you have to start walking. Now the 4th law, the law of value. Most people chase money, but here's the paradox: money follows value, not the other way around. Money is not the root of success, value creation is. This might be the most misunderstood principle in all of personal development. People focus on making money when they should be focusing on making value. The money is simply a measurement of the value you've created. Think about every successful business or career you admire. At its core, it solves a problem or fulfills a need better than existing alternatives. Apple doesn't make money because they want money. They make money because they've created products that millions of people find valuable enough to purchase. Amazon doesn't generate revenue because Jeff Bezos loves numbers. They generate revenue because they've made shopping more convenient for hundreds of millions of customers. This principle appears in the most unexpected places. Mother Teresa, who took a vow of poverty, understood the law of value perfectly. She created enormous value by serving the poorest of the poor in Calcutta. That value attracted resources from around the world: donations, volunteers, recognition, and ultimately the infrastructure to help millions of people. She wasn't seeking money, but her focus on creating value attracted the resources necessary to expand her impact. Adam Smith, the father of modern economics, explained this in The Wealth of Nations through his concept of the invisible hand. When individuals focus on creating value for others, they simultaneously create value for themselves. Not because they're being altruistic, but because markets reward those who solve problems effectively. But here's where most people go wrong. They try to extract value before creating it. They ask, how can I make money? Instead of, how can I create value? They focus on getting rather than giving. This approach fails because it's fundamentally backwards. Consider the story of Ray Kroc and McDonald's. Kroc didn't become successful by trying to get rich quick. He became successful by obsessing over creating value for 3 different groups. Customers wanted fast, consistent food. Franchisees wanted a proven business system. Employees wanted clear procedures and fair wages. By creating enormous value for all 3 groups, he built one of the most successful companies in history. The psychological principle behind this is reciprocity. When you create genuine value for someone, they feel a natural inclination to reciprocate. But this only works if the value is authentic. People can sense when someone is being transactional versus genuinely helpful. Warren Buffett embodies this principle in investing. He doesn't try to buy and sell quickly to make money. He looks for companies that create genuine value for their customers over long periods of time. Then he participates in their success by owning pieces of those companies. His wealth isn't from manipulation or speculation. It's from identifying and supporting value creation. There's a concept in physics called conservation of energy. Energy cannot be created or destroyed, only transformed from one form to another. The same principle applies to value and money. Money doesn't appear from nowhere. It's transformed value made exchangeable. When you create value, you create the potential for that value to be transformed into money. But timing matters. The right solution at the wrong time creates little value. The wrong solution at the right time also creates little value. Value is created when the right solution meets the right need at the right time in the right way. Consider how Airbnb emerged during the 2008 financial crisis. People needed extra income and had spare rooms. Travelers wanted cheaper accommodations. The founders didn't create the need. They recognized it and created a solution that served both sides of the market simultaneously. They created value by solving a problem that existed but wasn't being addressed effectively. This is why the law states, if you provide the right solution in the right place, the money will follow. It's not automatic. You have to do the work of understanding what people actually need, creating solutions that genuinely help, and delivering those solutions effectively. But when you do, the financial rewards follow naturally. Here's how to apply this law. Instead of asking, how can I make money? Ask, what problems do I see that aren't being solved well? Instead of thinking, what can I sell? Think, what can I create that would genuinely make someone's life better? Instead of focusing on your financial goals, focus on your value creation goals. The money isn't the destination. It's the scorecard that tells you how much value you've created. The final law is perhaps the most counterintuitive. Your power comes not from what you fight, but from what you choose not to fight. In a world that glorifies hustle culture and saying yes to everything, the ability to say no becomes a superpower. Sun Tzu wrote in The Art of War, "The supreme excellence is to subdue the enemy without fighting." He understood that true victory comes from winning the wars that matter, while avoiding the battles that don't. Every ounce of energy spent on unwinnable or unimportant conflicts is energy not available for conquering what actually matter. Steve Jobs exemplified this principle when he returned to Apple in 1997. The company was dying, trying to compete in dozens of different markets with hundreds of different products. Jobs did something radical. He eliminated over 70% of Apple's product line. Instead of trying to fight on every front, he chose 3 or 4 battles he could win decisively. This strategic restraint didn't limit Apple's success, it enabled it. Warren Buffett has a similar philosophy in investing. He says no to thousands of investment opportunities each year to focus intensely on the few that meet his strict criteria. His success comes not from making more investments, but from making fewer, better investments and avoiding the distractions that could dilute his focus. The psychological principle behind this is called decision fatigue. Research by Roy Baumeister revealed that every decision we make depletes our mental resources. The more trivial decisions we make, the less mental energy we have for important decisions. This is why Barack Obama wore the same style of suit every day as president. He eliminated trivial decisions to preserve mental energy for consequential ones. But strategic restraint goes deeper than decision fatigue. It's about understanding the difference between motion and progress. Motion is activity for its own sake, responding to every email immediately, attending every meeting you're invited to, fighting every argument you encounter online. Progress is activity that moves you toward your most important goals. Marcus Aurelius captured this in his Meditations. Confine yourself to the present. He wasn't advocating for mindfulness in the modern sense, he was advocating for focus. When you spread your attention across too many concerns, you dilute your power to influence any of them meaningfully. There's a business concept called opportunity cost, the value of the best alternative you give up when making a decision. Every yes is automatically a no to something else. When you say yes to checking social media, you're saying no to deep work. When you say yes to an unnecessary meeting, you're saying no to strategic thinking. When you say yes to arguing with strangers on the internet, you're saying no to building something meaningful. The most successful people understand this intuitively. They don't try to do everything. They try to do the right things exceptionally well. Jeff Bezos has a disagree and commit philosophy for decisions. But he also has a slow down and think deeply philosophy for choosing which decisions deserve his attention in the first place. Consider the story of Charles Darwin. When he was developing his theory of evolution, he could have rushed to publish immediately to claim priority. Instead, he spent decades refining his thinking, conducting additional research and preparing for the inevitable controversy. When he finally published On the Origin of Species, it was so thoroughly researched and carefully argued that it revolutionized science. His strategic restraint, waiting until he could make an overwhelming case, proved more powerful than rushing to be first. This principle applies to personal relationships as well. The person who argues every point rarely persuades anyone. The person who chooses their battles carefully Speaking up only when it truly matters carries far more influence when they do speak. There's an ancient Stoic practice called the discipline of desire. Instead of trying to get everything you want, you train yourself to want what you have and to be selective about what you pursue. This isn't about lowering your standards. It's about raising them so high that only truly important things deserve your attention. Here's how to apply strategic restraint. At the beginning of each day, identify the 3 most important things you could accomplish. Then ask yourself, what could I say no to today that would protect my ability to focus on these 3 things? At the end of each week, identify the activities that felt like motion rather than progress. How could you eliminate or reduce these next week? Remember, the person who fights every battle wins none. The person who chooses the right battles wins the war. These 5 laws, Murphy's Law, externalization, Hilbert's paradox, the law of value, and strategic restraint, aren't separate techniques you apply in isolation. They're interconnected principles that, when combined, create what we might call the architecture of excellence. When you face your fears repeatedly, you build the courage necessary to act despite uncertainty. When you externalize problems by writing them down, you create the clarity needed to identify which battles are worth fighting. When you embrace imperfect action, you create value in the real world, rather than perfect plans in your imagination. When you focus on creating value, you attract the resources necessary to multiply your impact. When you choose your battles strategically, you concentrate your energy on what matters most. Together, these laws create a powerful feedback loop. Each one amplifies the others. The person who practices all 5 doesn't just become more successful, they become anti-fragile. They don't just survive challenges, they get stronger from them. But here's what's crucial to understand. These aren't quick fixes or life hacks. They're principles that require practice, refinement, and integration over time. The goal isn't to master them perfectly, it's to begin applying them consistently. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Be like the rocky headland on which the waves constantly break. It stands firm, and round it the seething waters are laid to rest." This is what these 5 laws create in your life, a foundation so solid that the inevitable storms of existence don't destroy you, they strengthen you. The most successful people aren't those who avoid problems. They're those who have developed superior systems for navigating problems. They don't have perfect lives, they have anti-fragile approaches to imperfect lives. They don't wait for certainty, they create certainty through action. Start with one law. Choose the one that resonates most strongly with your current challenges. Practice it until it becomes instinctive. Then add another. Over time, these principles will compound, creating results that seem impossible from your current vantage point. The person you become through practicing these laws will be capable of achievements that the current version of you cannot even imagine. Not because you'll have special powers, but because you'll have aligned your thinking with the fundamental laws that govern human potential. Success isn't about overcoming the laws of reality. It's about understanding them and working with them instead of against them. These 5 laws aren't suggestions. They're descriptions of how exceptional results actually occur in the real world. The question isn't whether these laws work. The question is whether you'll work with them. If these 5 truths shifted your perspective on what's possible in your life, subscribe to this channel. The next video will take you even deeper into the psychology of success, exploring the hidden patterns that separate those who dream about extraordinary lives from those who actually create them. Hit that notification bell, because the insights we share aren't available anywhere else, and they're designed for people who are serious about transformation, not just entertainment. Your future self is counting on the decisions you make today. Make them count.